Hi guys, and welcome to our next painting webinar. Today is Friday, August 27th. I can't believe it, yeah, I'm gonna start the sketching, but before that, just wanted to mention that Jen is not gonna be here today because her family is coming to visit her. So yeah, it's just gonna be us. And so let's get this started. We posted, hold on a second, I'm gonna close this window. We posted some images of daguerreotypes. Some of them were part of the Smithsonian collection that was recently acquired, but some of them are not. So we just did a little bit of a search and we found some of the artists, the photographers that were mentioned in the collection, and we found other images of African-American community members, leaders, business owners, intellectuals that were represented through this medium, the daguerreotype. Daguerreotypes produce two images, a positive and a negative. And sometimes the negative was not discarded and it just became a piece of art. And that would have been a very interesting assignment as well. But there are very few, they were very popular, but there are very few that remained or that they survived, that's the word. So let me just see. Okay, perfect. All right, so some people will join us later. Some people that have signed up will not join us, but they will watch the webinar later. But let's just, yeah, that's why we're recording this time. So any questions, just let us know. Let me know on the chat. All right, so first things first, my format 12 by 16 as usual, and I'm using, I'm using the cotton paper. I'm just, that's just gonna back up a little bit. Okay, so yeah, 12 by 16. And I was able to print out an image that it's 11 by 17. So it's approximately similar in proportion. But I have these empty spaces. And I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to stretch the frame. And all of the images that we selected have the frame included. And it's up to you if you want to include the frame or not. It's going to be a creative choice, but I think in my case, I want to include the frame. So I'm going to start by actually doing the line separating the edge of the frame. Okay, here we go. Oops. So hold on one second, because we have someone joining us. Who's joining us? Oh, no. Okay. Oh. Okay, perfect. All right. So, yeah. Okay. So again, I'm doing the frame. First, there's something that I really like about adding the frame. I think that's going to be okay. In a way, the frame helps me to set up the compositional movement parameters, because we talk about compositional movement all the time and how important it is to leave some space around the focal points of the painting, unless you you want to do it differently. But yeah, I think that's very important. So I don't know how developed this frame is going to be, but I'm doing it. So I'm doing two focal points, I would say. One is the frame, the other one is the figure inside. And I'm stretching the frame to occupy the entire format. So the frame doesn't have the same proportions. So that gives me with the opportunity to perhaps enlarge or distort the actual figure. So I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do that, but let me just, let me just find out first what the frame is going to look like. Yeah, I think that's okay. I'm actually happy that I'm using the frame, and I'm happy that I'm stretching it to occupy the entire pictorial space, because I don't know what I would have done with these empty spaces right here. I think compositionally it looks a little bit awkward, especially because of the way I printed this out. So I'm glad I'm stretching the frame a little bit. So I think after stretching the frame, I'm gonna see how, maybe a little bit taller. I will distort the image a little bit, actually. Yeah, so I'll use a little bit of distortion perhaps, but I'm gonna go ahead and do my potato shapes. So this is my basic potato shapes. I like to work with silhouettes. So what we're doing essentially is just understanding the constraints, or the constraints of our pictorial plane, which means the actual shape, size, orientation of our format. And that is very important, because if we are using an image reference as a source and we have a specific format, most likely we overlook the fact that we're just going to do something completely non-integrated in the format or with the format. So I think the silhouettes allow me to make adjustments in the space. And again, I'm just going to stretch that figure a little bit. Maybe I'll just drop the shoulders a little bit more. So I think I'm looking at the negative space between both focal points. So it doesn't feel like, this feels a little bit too low. So notice that the alignment, it's not exactly the same. I stretched the frame quite a lot. So I'm making sort of like an interpretation of the proportions on my format, consciously, intentionally, purposefully, just because I want to make sure nothing in the painting compositionally gives you the idea of something odd. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and go back to the silhouette. And this time I'm flickering my eyes back and forth, very important. What I'm doing is I'm just refining some of the, okay. Some of the curves before I go into the structural lines. Composition is extremely important, more important than likeness, more important than proportions. And it's amazing how we think we can, tackle it, deal with it. And as you know, it's just one of the most difficult things to do or deal with, I would say. So a studied composition will give you a much stronger painting than a well-developed painting, always. And by experience, I feel composition, it's something that it feels like the last frontier. It's never really dealt properly. So I invite you to please before you lay any strokes on your painting, check out the focal points, how far are from the edges, how intentional you want the pictorial space to organize itself. Extremely important, because you could just do silhouette work and have a much stronger painting than have something like highly realistic or mimicking. Okay, so I'm gonna do the structural lines. We're doing essentially a figure drawing or figure drawing. It's not essentially a full portrait, I would say, just because at least on mine, I have the upper torso, I have hands. So I make a distinction between a portrait and a figure rendering. It includes movement, it includes gravity, it includes rotation, and it's not so much focused on facial features. So I look at my format 12 by 17, and I look at where the facial features are, and this is going to comprise a very small part of my painting. So my next sort of like advice would be, do not rely on the amount of detail on the facial features of this particular assignment in order to feel like you are advancing your painting. This facial features would be at the bottom of the list. Just check alignments, rotation, angles, and how different this left side from the right side is going to be. Nevertheless, the most important lines, or the three most important lines on a face, would be the hairline, the chin line, and the neckline. So this would be my next step, to just go over those. Always make sure you don't do things mirror image or too regular. We have to constantly put our attention in making sure that things are not super regular, because that's where we go all the time. We do something on the left and it looks the same on the right. We do a shoulder, the left shoulder, the right shoulder, it's the same thing. We do the left corner of the mouth, the right corner of the mouth, it has the same. The chin line, it's a little bit different here. I'm going to do the neckline. Again, just be aware that most likely things are not regular. So the neckline is an inverted triangle, but it's not symmetric. So I know that there's a little bit of a rotation. So this would be my three first structural lines. I'm not going to do any facial features here. And I already want to shape some things up, but I'm going to go to other structural lines that feel sort of like easier maybe to apply. The jacket, because there's high contrast. The shoulder, the sleeve. The hand, I'm just going to do a very simplified silhouette. And don't be intimidated by the crudeness and the strong graphic simplicity of your lines. It's just going to confront you and make you feel like, oh my gosh, this looks this or that. I feel like this is a matter of building endurance. That's exactly how I would focus. When you sketch, there is no doubt that you will feel confronted. And I don't know if there's any other words for it, but the crudeness of your lines, it's just gonna be hard to avoid judgment but I have no technique to maneuver over or around this emotion. It will arise. My only advice is you have to, at some point, you will have to build endurance to cope with that confrontation, because there's going to be a point in which you will either want to quit altogether, or you will develop this endurance against the emotional confrontation of feeling like your sketch looks terrible. And that's how I would put it. There's nothing, there's the hand right here. So I'm just gonna also draw. Sometimes seeing other painters translate reality in different ways helps me become much more forgiving or kinder to myself, because without any ideas of how other people do the sketches of the paintings, we generally tend to be pretty harsh on ourselves, pretty brutal. So I know that I have to be kind to myself. I know that the confrontational aspect will happen. And that's what happens when people join. This is like it's been a very interesting time, especially August, because we've had, because of the article, we had like a handful of new painters, and it's been almost like a social experiment. There, it's been really helpful because you can see those feelings come up like clearly, you know. So it's always a teaching moment for me. I can't talk about this, obviously, with someone who just joined us, because you can barely cope with the amount of information that you're receiving, and then also cope with your own self-imposed pressure to perform. Never mind thinking about enduring something. Okay, so maybe I'm just focusing too much on detail, but I should focus on structural lines. I think that's okay. Change, redo, reposition. I'm okay. I think I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this. Simplification, the pens are here. Simplify, repeat, and redo, redo, redo. I think that's also very important. Okay, so I think this will be my next step in sketching, and I'm not gonna rush too much. I think we have plenty of time. My gosh, we have so much time. So I'm gonna move. Let me just see if I need to change something. I think I'm gonna leave it like that. So both shoulders, I want to see if I did it too repeated or too symmetric. Again, we always have a tendency to make things regular, not angled enough, mirror image from each other. That's the catch. It's where we gravitate towards, you know, simplification by making the same things left and right with the same angles. So it's something that I always try to be aware of in order to push the drawing forward. There's a little bit of a belly here, so I'm just gonna straighten this. That made a huge difference. And again, this, I think that's okay. There's a jacket. I missed this line. So I'm going to make this line right below here. And then the pants, and then there's darkness here. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, facial feature wise, again, if you just join a little bit later, facial features are not crucial or dominant here because we're showing a little bit of the figure. So if my facial features would be in a very small part of the painting, like a couple of square inches. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Bone structure will be more important than facial features. By all means, we don't have to do that detailed facial features. It could be a little bit less pronounced or representational. But if you have to, eyebrows first, shape of the eyes, bottom of the nose, line between the lips, and that would be the order from above. Maybe what I'll do is the line, the vertical axis line, just to make sure that my face is not facing forward. It looks like it's facing forward, but it's really not entirely, because I see the ear on the right, but I don't see the ear on the left. So that tells me that this figure, it's not facing forward completely. So I'm going to make sure and exaggerate this idea and then the tilt on the face. Okay, so this is what I did. And then after that, I'm just gonna, and the light direction comes from this area from the left. So maybe what I'll do, I'm not even going to add lines, just gonna do a little bit of shadow work or shading, a little bit of shading, because I don't want to get caught up with any miniature type of work. See. Okay, so I think I'm okay with that. And perhaps okay, I would say I wouldn't be concerned or worried about likeness, resemblance, because that's something that it's not important. Can deal with it like later. But I'm gonna go ahead, since we have like extra time, and move to the next and final stage of sketching. We did silhouette work. We studied the composition. Again, I cannot reinforce that enough. Check out your compositional movement. Decide if you need to distort something or not. We talked about what I found would make this a little bit weird. Yeah, just very important. And I'm gonna go darker to lighter. So I'm gonna shade, because it's since it's a monochromatic image, I think the charcoal will help me set the order of things. Darker to lighter. So this is darker. Blocking out this area, also very important, darker. I already know that there are things here that I need to change. Okay, excellent. This is a little less dark, so I'm putting less pressure. And what you can see that the shading is just helping me fade the line and turn it into an edge instead. I will do this pattern maybe later. And I am just fading or giving like value, darker value to the face. There's high contrast here, so I'm just going to bring the higher contrast underneath the nose. On the eyes, I could do that later, but yeah, I think so. I think that was a very important move. Let's sort of like get this out of the way because it was kind of like a concern. We did this on Tuesday, by the way, since last week we cancel the sessions instead of starting the series on Friday of last week. We started on Tuesday. So we had a few painters, and it was interesting because there was a concern about, and I'm going to bring it up, the figure not representing the skin tone or ethnicity or and I don't think that is important right now, because if anything, it would be a reflection or an example of how we tend to always create the same figures, the same portraits. So it's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. My point is that this figure that we're representing doesn't have to look at this stage necessarily like an African American or not, because that was a concern that it just happened like too early in the process. Just know that it's a reflection on how we have a tendency of representing the same person when we sketch or draw or paint. And that is an opportunity to diversify and sharpen our focus and understanding that we need to practice more, and we need to focus on distinct elements that are unique in every figure we represent. Okay, so fingers, I'm not concerned. So I think I'm just gonna do a few lines. And same thing with the knuckles here. Just be, I'm done. I have to be really careful, because with charcoal, I don't want this to be a drawing. The more I develop this as a drawing, the more that I will end up colorizing instead of painting. And it's just gonna be, I won't be as efficient. I'm just bringing awareness to what can happen. I just want something that gives me a hint or something that helps me organize my next step. But charcoal is so wonderful and forgiving that we feel like it gives us a dopamine rush, and we have to be aware, because we are wired, our brains are wired to feel that rush of dopamine. So charcoal provides that during the process, because at some point we start feeling good about the possibilities of our chart of our sketch. And then who wants to say no to that rush? So we go deeper and we go deeper and we go deeper, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But the problem is that everything will be so detailed and fragmented that then the painting will be reduced to filling up spaces with color. And we'll just get bogged down, if I can use that word, with detail and tiny things, and it's just going to drain our energy. So don't over sketch. Don't over sketch. Half an hour, perfect time. I'm not gonna expand that, but this was I'm very happy. Just try to find conclusion on each stage, so you don't have to put all the eggs in the final basket, because that's kind of like brutal, and most likely it's just will disappoint us. So I find joy in my potato shape. I found joy in my structural lines, and I'm happy about where this is right now. So I'm gonna start staining. And first of all, let me just bring all my brushes. I need to buy new brushes, by the way. I'll just get one of the big brushes. And here we go. I think I have enough paint. I'm sure. I'm recycling my palette from last night. So color. Okay. So this is not just black and white. Obviously, there's something really wonderful about the color of this monochromatic rendering. But I'm not going to worry too much about that yet. I'm just going to use maybe umber, raw umber and gray for now, and yellow ochre and chromatic black perhaps, because I'm doing the wash, the staining. It's very it has very specific a very specific function, which is to prime the paper, to seal the charcoal. So I don't have to study the color, and I want to make sure that again, I don't get bogged down with too many details. So darker to lighter. Here we go. Sorry. I'm just gonna, turpentine, solvent, to make sure that I'm actually able to. And color fields. So I'm not super detailed, or here we go. Darker to lighter. I feel like if I use chromatic black, it's going to be too dark. I'm afraid of the darkness of my darker areas. So very transparent. I don't put too much paint. I'm doing the staining. Darker to lighter. I try darker to lighter. Don't worry about proportion or position of things at this stage. I would say I try my best with the sketch, but I'm not too hard on myself about where things land, because I know that I'll be able to move things around. We have to learn to be flexible, because I feel like when we paint, we sin of inflexibility sometimes. And it's amazing, because we would never associate creativity with inflexibility. I mean, they don't mix well. But at the same time, I don't think as painters, we practice flexibility enough. And what is flexibility? For me, it's understanding that I try to avoid putting myself in corners. So going back to what I did, I do my best with the sketch. I do try to put another criteria in addition to the ones that I am familiar using, because I don't want to end up becoming mechanical and turn this into a habit. There's always something exciting that happens with the sketch that I didn't consider before. So I do try to put all my effort into sketching, but at the same time, I try to be flexible, and in the sense that I understand that things may just end up falling in a place that, you know, at this point may not look particularly strong, but I know I'll be able to make modifications. And that is what makes a better painter. What makes one of the things that makes a better painter. Flexibility, not feeling like you are caught in a spot where you cannot go up or down, left or right. There's nothing more frustrating. And it's not easy to practice that or achieve that flexibility. Okay, I'm just continuing with my staining. And that's probably gonna remove everything on the face, but that's okay. So I'm gonna try to put the darker side of the face first, following the charcoal. I'm gonna let the charcoal guide you. I'm using a big brush, and I'm wiping off pretty much everything, and yet I'm able to retain the essence of the portrait. So this should be also a teaching moment about how much you really need to have like a strong base. Okay. I think that's okay. I think that's okay. And then this is pretty much white, but I'm just going to use, because I need some wetness here, I'm going to use just turpentine. And the pattern, I think I'm just going to change the pattern or do something later. Texture, leave it at the end. This is texture. I'm not going to do the pattern right now. This is pretty, you know, I would say it's a pretty texture at the end. All right, I'm just continuing. This is a little bit darker. I'm doing, I like to repeat or to articulate what it is that where it is that I'm at. So I am doing staining right now, and I'm doing darker to lighter, consistency, very lean, which means turpentine and a little bit of paint, but not too much. Doing the pants, I let the charcoal. There's a reason why I did the sketch first. I like to do the sketch first because it just guides my decision making, and I just find it a little bit easier. Most painters, they just don't like that. They just go ahead and they just wash the entire thing first and then they sketch. But I like to have that flexibility of the charcoal. I like to experience that rush of dopamine when I sketch with charcoal. Because ultimately we do this because we like to challenge ourselves, obviously, but also because we want to find some thrill and excitement. And I feel like that's human nature. I find excitement in challenging myself with this. That's why I love it so much. My point is that if I have to wait at the end of the process to find joy, I wouldn't do this. What's the point of struggling nonstop for me. I mean, I'm just obviously expressing my individual feelings about this. I need to find some sort of like a reward. And to me, yeah, I think that's okay. That's another thing. I mean, how do you find reward? You know, it's easy to say, do you find reward in perfection? No, I find reward in many ways. I find reward in accomplishing a stage, for example. That's rewarding in itself. You have to redefine what feeling rewarded for means when you create, because I feel like we have everything completely upside down. We only feel rewarded if our work looks like someone else's work. Well, of course, that's not going to help in any way. So redefining what you find rewarding, I think that's pretty important. Yeah, I'm excited. So I'm just going to continue. Maybe I'll just use some gray mixed with raw umber. Yeah. And I'll just build the staining on the background. I'm still staining, and that's good. 45 minutes. That's not too bad. Let me see if I can just, in the next 5 minutes, I can do this and I can put myself to work on first notes before the second hour starts. Also, I should say this is the most difficult part of the entire process. You guys know, I can tell you this. So I have to also recalibrate and readjust my expectations to this stage, because we get really spoiled when we do a painting and then we sort of like work, or we're in that place of the painting process in which every minor application creates a whole fireworks of effects. And then we become so spoiled because we can do so much. And then we start from scratch, and then we feel really stressed because there's so much that needs to be done before we get to that sweet spot where we can really manipulate and tweak, and as we mentioned yesterday, nitpick and be more demanding. It just takes time. Yeah, let's go for the gold. Let's go for the gold. The frame. I'm doing just, this is a little green, but I'm doing chromatic black and yellow ochre for now, because I want to go out and move towards the first notes. Very lean, so it just gives me speed. This is what's important. If you don't make it lean or with a very watercolor consistency, your brush will not leave any marks. It will be a parched, thirsty stroke that's not going to give you much coverage. So that's why it's a good idea to start with a wash. There we go. And boom, I'm done with my wash. Yay. All right. So that's not too bad. I'm like almost 45 minutes. I would say it's a huge success, because considering that this is a figure and it takes a little bit longer to study the sketch, I'm pretty happy about the pace. Not that that's important, but I think so. I always recommend and suggest to not leave any spaces blank, because Nothing makes your progress or your painting look more unfinished than having one blank space. It's not really, I don't know, because I could just walk away from it and then just say that I did a study, and then this could really stand as a study. So block everything out. I'm going to switch my brushes. I'm going to go to first notes, and first notes, I'm going to start color blocking. So first note, since when you build up a little bit of opacity on the wash that you did, there's no blending, there's no texture. So what you do is kind of like rework the edges by applying a layer on top of the wash that builds opacity. The idea is to block out shapes. So you have the opportunity to build on the wash and also the opportunity to continue the drawing component. And another very interesting part of the first note process is to study the color. So I think what I'm going to do here is study that torrid gray. This sort of like reminds me of, I'm going to study the color on actually the background. The background, yeah, I'm going to study the color on the background. So I'm taking the first notes to kind of like study my palette, and I'm putting the raw umber. It's not raw umber, obviously, it's a little lighter. When you try to create similar tones, you consider value always first. Oh, wow. Okay, so this is pretty easy. Actually, this is pretty easy. I just mixed gray and raw umber and I got the tone. So gray and raw umber. Gray and raw umber will be the core of my palette. Gray and raw umber. And I'm going to try to use chromatic black to see if I can get, no, I need more black. The darker tone. The darker tone is not, it's too blue. Okay, that's a good, test. So I'm going to bring some burnt sienna. Okay. So there's definitely some warmth on those tones. Definitely. And my chromatic black, it's too cold for it. So I need to put some burnt sienna. I'm just testing yeah, it's still very much. Yeah, it's still very much, let me see, too cold. Okay, so here's the what I think I found. So there's definitely chromatic black, which is the black that we've been using for a while. It feels a little bit too cold. So I have to be extremely careful because what's beautiful about the daguerreotype effect, it's the fact that the blacks are not entirely pitch black. And I feel like this is already too graphic. I feel that I'm gonna try to soften the blacks to create a more of a analogous value system. Because my take is that we have to be careful, at least be careful, be aware of two things happening. Number one, that our darks are too cold. And number two, that the darks are too black or too dark. So this is, to me, this is the most important or most exciting part of creating second notes. It's the fact that we get to study. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very good. We get to study our color palette. It's each painting will have its own color palette strategy. And I'm already telling you right now that I am so happy that I studied this, because I think the hair was already too dark. It was definitely too dark. So I'm happy that I brought in or that I studied that distinction between chromatic black with a little bit of gray and a little bit of burnt sienna. Oh, and by the way, this is just inspiration. We don't have to abide by any of this, but I just feel like in order to break the rules, I like to sort of like understand the mechanics of it. And I would encourage you to test that. And then if you want to paint this with red or blue, um, and because that's what you want to do today, and that's your intention for a very specific conceptual reason, so then just go for it. Yeah, I'm just trying to articulate or explain what happens when we don't study the consequences or the effects, not consequences, of our decisions. And then we just rely on color intuition. The word intuition is really appealing. It's really, beautiful. It just kind of like has a connotation of freedom and this genuine art spirit. But I don't know. I just feel like it's interesting to, at least personally, I like to find out what's beneath what looks evident. And then I make my own decisions, because things may appear simple and easy when they may be a little bit more complex. So in this case, I feel humbled that that's not just black, and it's not even a cold black. It's a very rich taupe-like tone that creates a beautiful softness. It's not sepia. I didn't see any yellow ochre involved, and specifically on this one's. So I think that's also something that I look for. And if you notice, I'm blocking from dark to light. So I'm repeating what I did on the wash, but this time I'm using a medium brush, and I'm just color blocking. And I'm going all over the place. I'm avoiding or trying to avoid creating excessive black tones, just because I feel like that creates a very graphic effect. And I prefer to make it a little softer. As I do this, I'm just going to spend some time, but essentially I'm going to continue doing first notes, and I'll sort of like switch when I go back to the face, because I feel like that's something I want to leave a little bit later. Maybe I won't. But as I mentioned in the presentation, this was very interesting. This happened last week. The news of the Smithsonian Museum released a press kit explaining the acquisitions and how significant this was. They didn't mention this on the article, but because of the Romar Bearden biography that we read like 2 years ago, there was an intent when daguerreotype photography appeared. There was an intent by some evil, hateful majorities to prove, quote unquote, prove of the inferiority of certain minorities by taking pictures of people in not very flattering situations. And that was, I think, the earliest daguerreotype in that collection, that particular collection, was 1940s. I mean, I'm sorry, 1840s. And the last piece, or the earliest piece, was 1927. So quite a span of time. But essentially, they just created like racist propaganda at the time. And a very few very brave artists, photographers, decided to fight back by using the same medium to create images in the same manner that other people were using them, to feature real people in the community. And I'm just going back to business owners, educators, intellectuals, writers, and just other kinds of people. So there is a great significance of this first African-American photo studios. What's also interesting in the article, I don't think I just mentioned this in the presentation, it's the fact that these artists didn't just photograph members of their own community, but they also photographed abolitionists as well, and people that were part of the community, and they were just not necessarily, they were not against them. I don't know how to articulate that expression, but yeah, so families with kids and stuff like that, and people involved in the Underground Railroad as well. That's mentioned in the article, which is also important to mention because these artists cater to their communities at large, not just to one specific minority. All right, I'm just doing highs and lows, and yeah. Also very important, and I did mention that in the presentation, the culmination of these efforts to push back against, in a way, I mean, we use the word misinformation today, but photography was used at the time as a weapon of misinformation, in the sense that it was used to misrepresent whatever minority or group that was viewed as a target. So the efforts culminated with the international exhibition in Paris in the 1900s, that showed in the American Pavilion an exhibition of hundreds of photographs. This was, there were not daguerreotypes. 1900, it was already kind of like on paper, I guess, or it was a different technology to capture images. They were curated or organized among a few leaders by W.E.B. Du Bois, and it contained not only photographs of community leaders and intellectuals and people involved in politics and stuff like that, that were African, that happened to be African American, but also bibliography, hundreds of volumes written by African American, and patents. That was like really interesting as well. Or hundreds of patents created by African Americans. So it was a whole effort to show to the world the reality of this community in the US. This exhibition is intact, it survived, and it's in Washington. It's not on view, but I just find it fascinating because the American press did not, I mean, the exhibition won many medals and awards, but not in America. So the American media did not mention the significance or anything like that. So in a way, they lost that representing battle. The community lost that battle. But anyhow, so I think, yeah, so I'm just doing like a, sorry for the tangent, but I'm going back to what I'm doing right now. And just doing first notes, darker to lighter, trying to do darker to lighter. And before I continue, I'm just going to talk about, and I go on a different tangent, but I'm just going to talk about the face. I think I want to just spend a little bit of time on the face. So I'm just going to use pale, the pale version of that tone. Because again, I would actually, let's do this. No. We're just going to do the whole blocking out thing. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do actually. That, let me just test the value of the paint, and I'm going to do a bone structure. Yeah, it's even darker. Okay, all right. So I would say don't underestimate the simplification of our mind in doing things that have absolutely nothing to do with the actual image source. So I tested the value and I thought, oh, well, that will do it. And it was way too light. And this goes back to this idea that we end up painting the same flesh tone and the same facial features, regardless of the subject of the portrait. Don't underestimate that sort of like resistance of our minds to actually observe the variations. You have to be always sort of like on guard for it in a way, or whatever that expression is. But I'm going to do bone structure first. Light direction, very important. And I'm going to test the highlight value because I think I just need to find out. Way too light. Yep. Okay, so again, I'm just tilting towards lighter values. It will happen. It will happen. It will surprise you. Test it. We think like we can see everything, and then boom, our minds take control or take over, and our observation muscles, you know, they're non-existent. So bone structure, I'm doing bone structure. What's bone structure? It's the highs and lows on the skin that are the effect or the consequence of the light reflection on the skin. So certain areas will be darker, certain areas will be lighter. So that's the bone structure. So I'm building bone structure first. And then after that, be mindful of the excessive darkness of the darkest shadows. There's a difference between, you know, making the skin tone way too light and then being aware of making the facial features too dark, because it feels like this is counterintuitive. Wait, you're saying we have to make the skin tone darker, but then you're saying that we have to make the facial features lighter. So why am I saying this? The facial features, when we use excessively dark paint to trace them, we're actually sketching something that creates such high contrast that it almost feels illustration-like. So that's the reason why I would say just be gentle with the application of dark notes before you commit. Flicker your eyes back and forth. I'm not changing to the medium brush. I mean, to the small brush, because I know if I just go to the miniature, to the small brush, I'm going to start doing miniature things. So I'm not there yet. So I'm just applying dark notes over the facial features. The mouth, line between the lips, and then don't trace the lips yet. Okay, so I'm gonna continue by closing the gap on the hairline. I think that's very important. And then on the background, I want to create a little bit of a mess here. I want to just do a very blob-like. Okay, excellent, good. Look, I'm just not even looking at the photograph now. I'm just totally messing with the edge. Okay, great. And then what? So now I'm going to go with the oil and the lighter background. And I'm going to cut from the outside so I can reposition or redefine the edge, the important silhouette on this portrait. So notice that I just completely carelessly close the gap between things without trying to be precise. I think precision is the opposite of flexibility. To me, this word being flexible, or to learn to have painterly, no, what would be painting flexibility? I don't know, I'll find the terminology, the nomenclature. But yeah, what I'm doing is I close the gaps, and now I'm still doing first notes, but I'm reshaping from the outside, reshaping from the outside. There's something also that I love about these images, at least this one that I'm painting. And it's the fact that there is a sense of, there's a sfumato sense, this blurriness. So the technology, I don't know if it allowed like a very specific sharpening of the image or not, or if it's because I blew this up and then there's blurriness on the edges because it's not, there's not a lot of definition, but I love that. So I'm going to use a medium brush. I wipe it off. And this probably would be part of a second note stage. But what I'm doing is I'm just softening these edges because I like this sfumato effect. It just makes it much more integrated. I would use the word integrated, not realistic, much more integrated, and aesthetically much more interesting. I mean, it's just 100%. So sfumato is our friend. And this will be part of like second notes, and then just be mindful about that rush of dopamine. I think it's dopamine. I'm not sure. Or serotonin or whichever. I should probably know what I'm talking about, because sometimes when you feel like something is giving you that thrill, then you're going to forget about everything else. And now look, I'm just doing second notes and sfumatos already on this part. And so just be mindful. I'm just going to continue with other parts, I feel, because I actually, all right, this will be my strategy, because there's something about the underdeveloped areas that I really like. So this feels a little bit scary. So I'm just going to bring the actual iris, kind of like to give it a more of a presence and personality. And then my strategy will be to do that on the face. I'm getting too carried away, but then I want to paint the hands. So I'm going to forget about everything that's happening here. I want to give a little bit of TLC to the hands, because I think that's going to be okay. I'm even going to forgo the background, if that's a good expression. And then I'm going to spend time with the frame, because I feel like with the Afghan hound, I got the rush of dopamine with the hair, and I was so much enjoying that moment that I forgot about the frame. But I think with this, I'm going to spend time with the frame. In fact, I may just, that would be my strategy perhaps today. A little bit on the face, hands, and spend the remaining of the time with the actual frame, just to learn how to manage these pools through the process of developing the painting. I'm doing some highlights on the lips. Again, just with the intention of having a little bit more presence and personality. I'm trying not to create too many highlights here. So I learned my lesson when I tested the colors or the values, that I used highlights that were too bright. So I'm going to try to learn the lesson and not fall back into the pattern of doing a certain value. I'm blocking any empty spaces that I see in a very sloppy way too, but I know that's going to work in order to give this sense of like a full integration. And maybe a little bit of like second notes right now. And boom, I'm excited. This works. Not more. I'm not going to mess with this anymore, even though I just desperately want to tweak it and do more. But let's kind of like stick to the plan. I'm going to go to the hands. So as you know, I consider the hands almost the second most expressive part of a portrait. And I haven't read this anywhere or heard it from any teacher, but once there are hands involved in a portrait, I just feel like they're as important as the facial features. So that's the reason and the idea behind my decision to jump from the face to the actual hands. I mean, is that a rule? No, it's not a rule. It's just my own opinion about about expression and what causes or creates expression on a portrait. I don't know. What makes me think this way, but maybe I always try to connect or go back to the effect on of religious paintings as a kid on my subconscious, because I understand that there are certain things that I saw, but I feel like, you know, there was much more of an impact than my mind wanted to realize at the time. So perhaps that mannerism in those images of saints and disciples and biblical figures or characters going through hell, or I feel like not literal hell, obviously, but, you know, doing some crazy stuff. I feel like the artist always used distortion and exaggeration when it came to rendering hands. Sounds like a little bit tiny, but we'll see what happens. So I feel like there's a reason why I feel this way about hands today, and how important they are in multiplying the expression of the face. So that's why I consider them, yeah, so important. So creating the sleeve, always knowing that, you know, there's a chance, and that's something that perhaps is a habit. I think I'm gonna make a change right here. We tend to make tiny hands just because, first of all, I mean, it's not like we have a familiar relationship with painting hands. It's a matter of practice. But I just feel like one of the features or one of the tricks, one of the optical illusions of those Baroque painters, because it was all like Spanish Baroque essentially, was to enlarge and extend the hands. The fingers were ridiculously long, the palm was ridiculously stretched, and the size of the hands was much more imposing compared to the rest of the body. So I think I'm going to make the hand a little bigger. That's what I mean. I'm going to try to exaggerate that and see if I create some sort of effect with that. How am I making this hand bigger? I have no clue. I'm going to move the shadow out a little bit, and I'm going to extend the folded knuckle. And I'm hoping that that does the trick. Yeah, just hoping that that does the trick. Okay, so I'm not happy, but I think that's a step forward. So I just wanted to make sure that the hand feels a little bit much larger. And I think I'm going to take the lesson, the teaching moment that I got right here, and make this hand much bigger. So I'm actually, I'm going to use the gray. I have to be careful not to make highlights too bright. And I'm going to expand, almost like painting a little bit of an extra border. And I'm going to try not to be too evident with the definition of because that worked on the face. The reason why I feel this is successful is because I didn't try too hard to paint or draw the facial features. So just be mindful, because you're going to feel like you want to do the eye line, because we associate beauty with definition. On top of it, we feel like conceptually we have to a responsibility to make these figures on these daguerreotypes very dignified. So we have that added weight on our shoulders to make their facial features beautiful. And that's all great and fine. But the problem is that if we try too hard, we're just going to create a very crude and non-integrated look. So we have to juggle with this idea of feeling responsible to create a sense of beauty, and this idea of like dignifying the subject, because conceptually that's what this is about. And I'm going on a tangent right here, because I feel like misinformation and misrepresentation of any minority, it's what's being used to exercise power over them, whether it's racial or whether it's gender-based or whether it's sexuality-based. There's always this battle, this fight between those who use misrepresentation to cast doubts about the intentions of a group, and those who try to push back against that misrepresentation. So it's just very interesting to see it represented here in this way and with this language, but that's not something that it's exclusive to one minority. It's just essentially the story of all kind of like minorities that have been appropriated by the powers to be, or whatever, that expression, and lost control of their own narratives. It just happens every single day, unfortunately. So I think I'm gonna have to also build the background. I'm gonna do what I did right on the face. I'm gonna bring some darker notes and try to avoid this graphic look. Yeah. So I mean, I always sort of like connect with this idea. Not that, well, yeah, I think it's important, because I think growing up, every example of LGBT figure that was on TV when I was a kid, it was just ridiculous. It was dehumanizing. They always brought, not that that matters, I guess, because you know there should be a space for everyone, but it was always that intention to misrepresent an entire community by just reducing the experience of the whole community to a single example that usually, you know, was meant to be stupid, grotesque, or have specific characteristics, you know, or evil. That happened with a lot of evil characters, by the way, in fairy tales and movies, that they all had this almost like feminine, refined sense of masculinity. So yeah, that's why I love that this group of artists, they fought back this propaganda with their own versions. Okay, so I think the outside, it's actually helping me the same way that I did the head. And I realize here that this is another, I wouldn't say red flag, but another teaching moment. Remember to always test the highlights or the shadows, because this may seem nice to me, but this is not the value of the skin that harmonizes or integrates with the rest. So I need to darken this part for starters. In order to, yeah, here, it's a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit, let me just kind of like close the gaps, and I'm closing the gaps in the most, in the sloppiest possible way. So I'm not even looking at anything. I feel like, whoopsie, maybe I should be a little careful. Okay, and I'm gonna close the gap right here with the shirt. And even below. All right, so below the forearm. And then what? So let me just bring some gray and see if I can build. I'm not gonna bring any white or anything. Some gray on top to kind of like build a slight illusion. And then I'm just gonna darken the fingers at the bottom because I feel like there is such interesting change in direction on the fingers as they drop down. The sense of gravity. This is pretty dark, so I think I'm going to bring my small brush right now and try to unify the shadow of the jacket with the shadow of the line between the fingers. And I know okay, all right, so I think I'm okay with this stage right now, and I have to learn to let go. I will be able to do this later, but I made the hand slightly larger, maybe just kind of like bring some of the darkness, and then I know I can mess with it, but at the same time, I just need to be able to be humble and not try too hard. All right, so this hand needs a little bit of help. Time, okay, all right, so half an hour. So, okay, I can. And what I'm gonna do is the same thing. The problem that I have there is that the highlights are too light. Too light, so that's the issue. I'm gonna bring some gray first. Already. And then I'm gonna close the gaps in a very sloppy way, but I just wanna make sure that I have something fully integrated. I'm gonna leave it like here, right here. I think that's plenty of success right now. Maybe with some gray, I can go over the knuckles. Just a little bit. That's it. That's what I'm gonna do. And then I just love the little scarf, or so I think I'm gonna define this. Sorry, I said I was gonna leave this the way it was, but I can help. And I think another part that I'm gonna do, I need to lift up the value right here, because I just feel like that's gonna give a really beautiful sense of space and perspective, this little tiny thing. And maybe just shape it. And it does. And actually, I didn't have to do anything on the pens, and it already looked like he's sitting down. So, and this looks like a little table. So I need to work on the folds. But all right, so I think I'm extremely happy, and I think this is way too stark. This is not painted at all. So I think I'm just gonna have to, should I bring some white? I don't know, maybe this painting could be done with everything except white. I think this is a little better. I just added some gray there. Okay, so I'm extremely happy, and I'm just gonna dedicate the rest of the session to the frame, because I think that's my second focal point, and I don't want to get super excited about the figure and then the frame. Just, I don't know, I just feel like it'd be interesting to I think also conceptually there's something in talking about dignifying a subject and talking about how to bring this idea of not prestige per se, but standing in the community, and which I think this is exactly what the photographer wanted to do when he, in this case, he took the picture of the gentleman. And I think the frame, the gold frame, it's sort of like contributes to this idea of um, uh, uh, raising the level of dignity on the photograph. So for that reason, I'm going to paint it. How about finding a conceptual reason for it? Okay, so what I'm going to do is just yellow ochre alone. No, yellow ochre, it's a little bit of burnt sienna. Yellow ochre and burnt sienna. Oh, I'm getting close. Maybe raw umber. Boom, I think that's it. Yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and raw umber. I think that's going to be my combination. All right, so here we go. I think first things first, I'm going to work on the definition. I want to see how much I can achieve in half an hour, frame-wise. And it may not be as developed, but I think there's something cool about doing that, again, conceptually. So that's what I will do. And actually, yeah, I'm gonna build a frame. There's a frame inside of a frame inside of a frame. So burnt sienna and raw umber. And the upper part is dark. So I'm just going to bring more of the, because there's something nice about the capturing the light direction of the environment in the frame. So not all the parts of the frame have the same light. And I find that really interesting. In fact, I think probably I'm going to spend some time up there and just building the dark spot, the darker area. So yeah, I know that with little, I'll achieve quite a lot. So I'm just going to build, I'm putting a lot of oil and building a lot of darkness here. It's a good practice, practicing texture, light direction. I'm going to bring more burnt sienna at the bottom because it's much warmer. And then there's more yellow ochre. So yellow ochre, and here I'm gonna, instead of white, I'm gonna bring some ecru to do the highlight of the frame just in this area. There we go. Okay, so I think it's working. It's definitely, I think we talked about the conceptual aspect of doing this, but I am feeling that painting the frame is making the portrait much more elevated. So I'm actually, this is something that I'm really excited about. Maybe we should do frames on every portrait from now on. Paint every frames on every portrait. So we don't have to do as much work on the portrait, and we let the frame kind of like elevate it. Okay, so I think here I'm just gonna do the combination, and I'm gonna concentrate on the upper part just because I want to get the physical labor out of the way. And maybe I won't necessarily apply the same amount of like detail. Here, I'm just gonna build the arts right here. And then I'm gonna do, oh my gosh. Lois, good job. You know, that's amazing. Good. I was thinking about it because I always talk about periphery, but I'm glad you did that. Okay. So I'm just gonna bring more darkness, and yeah, I'm just gonna I have to shift my focus. I have to shift my focus and understand that right now I'm just building the frame, really the framework. So it's a decorative object, and it has like a specific texture. So I have to shift my focus and be almost like more labor based, meaning or craft based. I'm going to do the shadow against the photograph too. This is not the frame, but I just feel like it just makes the frame pop. And again, I'll just work on the upper part. So I think I'm going to split up this into 3 sections. I'll do the upper part a little bit. Yeah, 5 more minutes. And then I'm going to just build the lower part. And then I'll leave the sides for another time. So what do I do about the texture right here? So what I'm going to do is with this kind of like a medium brush, I'm going to do some squiggling, darker first. And I'm just going to imagine some of the squiggle. I want to puncture that edge of the frame and then create a disorganized, hairy, or grass-like application of squiggles to give the idea of a carved surface. But I'm not trying to be very specific. Again, I think the importance here, it's the portrait, the first most important focal point. I do feel like the second focal point being the frame does have like importance as well, but I want to capture the essence of it, not necessarily be as detailed. Oops, sorry guys. Okay. So I am just continuing with that. And again, it's sort of like more, I wouldn't say tedious work, because I think it's just really fundamental and important, but it's definitely a little more mechanical or more like craft based without uh, trying to add any negative connotations about it. But I'm really enjoying it. It just feels like a really good build up. I'm gonna bring some of the double frame down. I need it right now. And I'm not gonna do anything else on the portrait today. So this is the end of the work on the actual portrait. Whatever time I have remaining here, it'll be on the actual frame. So amazing. I'm so thrilled. I've never done this before, painting the frame. And I just think that it's so cool to kind of like paint a frame on a painting. But conceptually, I think it's also doing its job. Totally doing its job. Totally doing its job. Amazing. It's just incredible. We didn't get to this point on Tuesday. We barely, to be honest, we barely started like first notes. It was like an interesting dynamic. But I'm so happy that we're doing this now. This is so incredible. Wow. Wow. In fact, I would say I'm changing my strategy. I think I'm going to do this grassy, squiggly kind of like a line, not following an order, trying to not be repetitive, but at the same time, keeping the rhythmic aspect of it. I'm going to do it throughout the entire frame, because I feel like if I just stop right now, I'll lose the energy, and then it would feel not well integrated. It's like painting one eye and not painting the other. When you paint the other, then you're drained. You just looks like an eye from a different person. And it's always good to pair both eyes. So I feel like this is happening here. If I just abandon this texture right here, this illusion of texture, it's going to be much harder to make it look integrated. So in time wise, yeah, we'll just spend like 5 more minutes over the hour, but time management, remember, really important and very crucial. I think the bottom part of the frame contains a little bit more of a darker area. So what I'm doing right now is building a more solid, here we go, more solid line compared to the top because of the light direction in the room, obviously. So the bottom, it's pretty solid. And yeah, all right, this wasn't too bad. Squiggling, following different directions, making sure that the line is not repetitive, but rhythmic. Rhythmic means that it kind of like keeps a similar order. I think that works. Maybe now, because that's what I would do with the eye, I can go back to certain areas that I feel are not really well integrated And I'm just going to build a few more strokes. So this feels more pattern-like, repetitive. So I'm bringing that color, and I'm going to try to make it much less repetitive. So I think this is just helping a lot in that sense. And then I'm going to bring some more darks on the other side to make sure that it just doesn't feel weak or doesn't look weak compared to like to the other sides. So I think that's what I'm going to do right here. It helps to kind of like step back. I cannot step back because but it helps to look at the screen. To me, it just helps because it just gives me this illusion of distance. So this needs a little bit of work right here. So I'm glad I didn't split up this into sections, but I'm splitting it up into entire frameworks. And at the same time that I'm doing this, I could bring some yellow ochre and burnt sienna, and then just build some strokes of paint inside. So just to kind of like juxtapose or alternate both the darker lines, the crevices of the carving, and the ridges of the carving. So it's not just one side. So that's what I'm doing right now. It's not exactly in the empty spaces. I just want to bring a few strokes here and there to build. Yeah, it's looking nice. To build, to clarify, to build that golden note at the same time, to strengthen the crevices, the darker values with some highlights. Yeah. Okay, I think this feels okay. And I'm gonna have time. Oh yeah, I have time. So I'm gonna go ahead and then do the other frame inside of the frame. So this also was a teaching moment. So what I'm gonna do from the outside, I'm just gonna build now the frame inside with highs and lows, and then the little dotted, and then the beveled frame, and then the shadow. So I think that is gonna take some time, but I think that's the way to do it. So again, just bringing this frame outside. I think that's good. Just to build, I'm going to try to do non-conforming brush strokes also to make sure that it just feels a little stronger and not predictable. Yeah, very good. So this is a little bit darker. So I'm going to bring some of this tone. And there's a little bit of darkness right here. So I know I don't have to be excessively detailed here. So I'm painting this with that awareness. Okay, here we go. And then this is a little bit redder. So I'm bringing the burnt sienna. And once I have everything blocked out, I'm going to do some second notes. "12 by 16, it's much larger. So if you're using 9 by 12, this should be a little bit more enjoyable, and in the sense that you'll be able to add more detail. But this is a pretty large surface. There's also some darkness here, so I'm just going to build a little bit of darkness. I can go, now that I have everything blocked in this area, I can go and play second notes, a few second notes. Yeah. And a lighter tones right here. I'm just going to bring some lighter areas, and here too. And the upper part's pretty dark, so none of that here. And I'm just going to blend this in a non-conforming way on the upper part. Okay, a little bit of lightness right here. Oh, I missed a spot. So yeah, just working one frame at a time. Some of the images have like they're not square or rectangular. They're sort of like an oval. So I'm interested and curious about what you guys did with those. Okay, so and then I think I have time. So all right, let's just stick to the plan. And the plan was to bring this next frame. And this next frame, it's interesting because it has this hammered look. So let's not, let's kind of like stick with the plan. Let's stick with the plan. I'm gonna sort of like do this stippling. Stippling, I forgot. Stippling on this area. Just to bring this idea. Oh yeah. Of a hammered look. It's building up. I think all together it'll kind of like everything will come together. That's what I meant to say. With its own simplicity of application, I think I'm gonna be happy in the end. I noticed that this hammered look, it has like hollow dots and then raised dots. So I'm gonna have to bring some lighter notes right here in between. But I like this. Okay, I'm just gonna continue. And yeah, so a few more minutes. I'm gonna take every single minute that I can. Because at this stage, every kind of like everything counts. So now there is a frame outside of this. And I think it's important to kind of like understand the mechanics of the framing here, because I can build this other area outside. It's a little bit lighter here. So, and I think that's the last one. Yeah, that's the last one. So I think I'm gonna try to bring that last frame, and then that's where I'll stop. This is pretty light, so maybe I'll just bring some white paint. Really pale. And this one is yellow ochre right here. So I think that's good. I'm gonna bring that. It's so nice to be able to use yellow ochre. It's not a color that it's used in large quantities. We still have the tube from a while ago, I believe. So it's nice to be able to use it a little bit more often. And I think finally, I still have time. Yeah, I have like almost 6 minutes. I'm gonna go for the cast shadow. There's a cast shadow that kind of like separates the photograph from the frame. Let's just bring it home. The cast shadow stops here. It's not everywhere. Here, it's here too. This is, it's a little bit strange. I don't know exactly if it's not cast shadow, but it's dark. I think it's part of the frame, but I'll bring it. Yeah, I think so. I'm gonna bring some gray to clean up this area. Because I made an extra border. And also bring some gray right up here. Oh my gosh. So okay, so I think I'm gonna stop here. Actually, I'm gonna stop here because I'm extremely happy. I am so also surprised. I think this really surprised me in the sense that painting the frame just elevated the photograph. It's such a strange subject to paint, which I find very playful. If you ask me, there's a combination of the conceptual significance of framing the photo and the playfulness in painting it almost like a Trump Doyle. I mean, I've almost said a different kind of Trump, but yes, you got me, Trump Doyle, whatever it's pronounced. I couldn't be happier. I think I'm just living this in a very solid stage. I'm just gonna work on it, but all the techniques and strategies sort of like worked. And this is the perfect example to understand that each painting will present different challenges and will, I mean, I don't, my knowledge of chess, it's probably like 10%, but I know that the thrill is understanding that each game is completely different. And so this is almost like a chess game in the sense that every subject on painting will present you different opportunities to uh, uh, tackle or face or deal with that specific subject in completely radically different ways. I couldn't be happier. I'll probably continue with I love the stains, the sepia stains. So I'll probably continue on Tuesday. We're not going to do this on Tuesday, but maybe we will, but certainly next Thursday. continue with the background, the facial features, but yeah, this was like really fun and very interesting. So I can't wait to see the work. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna take a 10-minute break. So let's reconvene at yeah, am I recording? I think I am. I hope I am. Oh my gosh. Oh yes, I'm recording. Okay. Phew. So yeah, let's reconvene at 1:15. Let's take a break. This was extremely intense and very physically demanding. We know that when our concentration is focused, it takes a toll in our energy levels. So please, number one thing to do is to stretch. Make sure that you stretch your shoulders. Make sure that you do whatever you need to do to kind of like bring some blood into your system, and then hydrate, nourish, and use the restroom, because again, we tend to forget about our bodily needs. That's how intense this is. This is. So I'm gonna take a picture and upload it, and then at 1:15, let's kind of like exchange, share, and have a chat about what you guys thought of the session. Looking forward to see you in 10 minutes.